Okay, so we're gonna have a share now on it's basically on the service of bias, the structure, the dimensions, the details of the Bais Hamikdash. It's pretty much probably 95%, 98% taken from Hilchos Bais Hamikdash and the Rambam. So we're gonna just go through the bias, Azara, various parts of the Bais Hamikdash. We'll get through whatever we can get through. So before we start, I just want to give a little bit of a, historical context. So over here you have a timeline. See on top, every section is the equivalent of 200 years. As we move along, we have Matan Torah in the year 2448, and then the following year, 2449, that's when the Mishkan was built. Now you can see that there's three periods when you have a Mishkan or a Bais Hamikdash. You have a period of time right here. We have the Mishkan for close to 400 years, a little less. Then you have Bais Rishon also around 400 years, 410 years. And then Bais Sheni also a period of 400 years, it's 420 years. During the Mishkan was a time when you had the Shaftim. There was 15 Shaftim for a period of around 350 years. By Bais Rishon, you already had like two different lines. You had the Malachim, the kings. There was a total, I think, 42 Malachim. 3 that ruled over all of Klal Yisrael, Shaul, David, and Shlomo. And then you had 20 that ruled over Yehuda and 19 over Yisrael. Or it's maybe the reverse, maybe it's the other way. 19 Yehuda and 20 Yisrael. I think those are the numbers, 42 Malachim. And they were in charge of the Gashmis. Some of them were Tzaddikim, David and Shlomo and others were terrible Rishayim. But their main job was to take care of like the Gashmis of Yidden. And for the Ruchnius, that was the role of the Navi. After the Churban, and then you had the Galus over here, there's no longer kings or Nevi'im, but there was still that type of structure of like the Gashmias, so to speak, and the Ruchnius. The Gashmias was the Nasi, was usually someone who was from Beis David, and the Ruchnius was the Av Bezdin. So let's look at the Mishkan for a moment. But in terms of the Mishkan, there was actually 5 periods, you can say. The Rambam actually puts it into 4, it combines the last 2. But there's 5 different places that the Mishkan was. We'll put the Midbar as one place, even though it traveled. And then afterwards, when they came to Eretz Yisrael, they divided the land, they conquered the land, divided the land, was for a period of 14 years. Then it was in Gilgal. And at these places, there wasn't a permanent structure. Both the roof was made out of, we're talking about the roof, we'll see in a moment, but the way the Bais Hamikdash works is there's an outer courtyard, a wider courtyard, it's in, that's not covered. But the inner area, which has the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim, that's to have it covered. These two first time, these points, they were both temporary structures, both in terms of the roof. The roof was material roof, all the areas that we learn about in Parshas Tzava, and also the walls, they're made out of beams that could be taken apart and put together. After that, you had a permanent structure, or semi-permanent, in Shiloh for 369 years. So it was semi-permanent because the walls were permanent. It was stone walls. So it's not something you can take apart and put together. It was there permanently in one area, but the roof was still made out of material. It was not a stone roof. Now, when we learned in Parshas Vayigash how Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulder and Binyamin cried on Yosef's shoulder. So we learned that they each cried for the Bais Hamikdash and the other one's portion that would be destroyed. So when it says Yosef cried on Binyamin, what's that referring to? Those are the 2 Bais Hamikdash that were the portion of Binyamin. If I remember, if I'm not mistaken, the Bais Hamikdash was between the portion of Binyamin and Yehuda, and the division was such that all the important parts were on the side of Binyamin, from the Mizbeach, and including the Hifl with the Kodesh and Kodesh Kodashim. That was all on the side of Binyamin. And I think it's brought down that that's why the Mizbeach only had a Yisayid on 2 sides. It didn't have a Yisayid on all 4 sides. We'll get that later. Because the other 2 that are missing the Yisayid, those were in the portion of Yehuda. And the whole thing had to be in the portion of Binyamin. So when Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulder for the 2 Bais Hamikdash, it's referring to the Bais Hamikdash, Bais Rishon, Bais Sheni. When Binyamin cried on Yosef's shoulder, what's that referring to? It's referring to this Mishkan Shiloh. Mishkan Shiloh was in the portion of Ephraim. Yosef didn't get his own place. There wasn't an area in Israel that was for Yosef. Yosef got 2 portions for Menashe and Ephraim. And the Mishkan Shiloh was in the portion of Ephraim. That's what he's crying about, the destruction of the Mishkan. It's brought down that the Mishkan was destroyed at the same time when the Plishtim took the Aron into captivity. And at that time also, it's brought down in some places that when Eli HaKohen heard of this, he passed away on the spot. passed away when he heard that the urn was taken in captivity, and around that time, that's when Mishkan Shili was destroyed. So that was there for 369 years. And then the Rambam puts the next two together. He says Noiv given is a total of 57 years. But the breakdown is in Noiv was there for 13 years, and then given for 44 years. I didn't see anywhere, I didn't do a lot of research, but I didn't see anywhere whether it discusses if they were permanent structures like Mishkan Shiloi in terms of the walls, or were they reverted back to the temporary structure like they had in the Midbar. I didn't see anything on that. There's another section over here, not really directly Negea, not directly related, is about by the Bais that was 70 years. We know that there was mistaken calculations made by Belshazzar and by Achashverosh. They thought that the Gula wouldn't happen because they heard about the Nebuah 70 years, and they miscalculated it. So this is not really directly related to the Bais Hamikdash, but it's just some historical context. So Nebuchadnezzar conquered, basically he was the powerful entity. He conquered it from Assyria, from Ashur, and he reigned for 45 years. And you can see it's during his reign that the Bais Hamikdash was destroyed. Nebuchadnezzar now will destroy the Bais Hamikdash. After him, his son, Evil Meredach, he reigned for 23 years. Now, if you do the math, 45 and 23, 68. And Belshazzar, who was the next king, he thought that the Gula was supposed to happen from the establishment of the kingdom of Bavel. So in his mind, that means it's going to happen 2 years into his reign. Because he had 45 and 23 is 68, 2 more years is 70. And that's why he made a whole celebration. He took out the Kalim of the Mishkan. But later on, he died. He reigned for another year, and he died as a result of doing this. And his calculation was wrong. We'll see what Achashverosh thought also made another mistake. Afterwards, you see the color change because at this point, Bavel, which conquered, majority of the land from Ashur, was now conquered by Madai and Paras, primarily Paras, Persia. They became the dominant entity. First, you had Daryavish. First Perish and Daryavish. They reigned combined for 5 years. And then afterwards, you had Achashverosh. Achashverosh was there for 14 years. What was Achashverosh's mistake? Achashverosh thought there was a different periods. One was first established with the Bavel, with the kingdom of Bavel. And then eight years later, one of the kings was taken into Galus. So Achashverosh said the mistake was you're not supposed to count from the establishment of the kingdom of Bavel. You have to count from when the Galus began, when this king was taken in Galus. So he said you have to add 8 years. So if you look, you have 1 year from Belshazzar, then you have 5 years over here, that's 6. 2 years into his rule, he said now we have the 8 years, it makes 70 years. And his mistake was that it doesn't start from the Galus of that final king, but rather it starts 11 years later when the Bais Hamikdash was actually destroyed. And so that's where you have to add an additional 11 years. That's just some history with regarding the Galus. So let's go now back to the actual Tzuras Havayis. So we're going to start sort of sequentially. We're going to go from the outside and work our way inwards. If you learn the Rambam, it more works from the inside out. You start off with what the Bais Hamikdash really is. It's not the Har Bayis. The Har Bayis surrounds it. We're going to work from the outside in. Okay, so we'll start off that all the measurements are in Amos and Tfachim. So if you're looking at an Amma, according to Rabbi Chaim, an Amma is around 19 inches. It's 18.9 something. We'll go with 19 inches. It's a little more than 1.5 feet. Another thing, just before we get into any details, is to get an idea of the magnificence of the Bais Hamikdash. It was much more in terms of the height than how big it was wide. So let's say you're in a place that's 10 miles wide. You don't really appreciate that. You can't see 10 miles far and see how big it is. But when something's tall, then you can see how huge it is. So in the Bais Hamikdash, you saw much more the magnificence physically in the height. So for example, every doorway in the Bais Hamikdash, except for the ulam was twice the size. Every doorway in the Bais Hamikdash, and everything here is scaled, was 20 amas high by 10 amas wide, which is about 30 feet by 15 feet, which is about the height of a 3-story building. That's every door was that high. It's a 3-story building, and the width, you can bring it over here. All the doorways in the Bais Hamikdash, except for the one to the ulam, which was twice the size, were 20 amas high and 10 amas wide. It's about 31.5 feet high and 15.5 feet wide, which is around 5 times the height of a person that's 5 to 10 inches, and it's as wide as 9 people. So here you can just see a sort of idea. It would be that's the height of it and the width of it. Now let's go into the actual structure itself. So we start off with the Har Bayis. This is just showing you the directions, northeast. southwest. So the Har Bais was a perfect square. It was 500 amos by 500 amos, which is around 800 feet by 800 feet, 787, 788 by, so it's a square, 788, let's say by 788. Now within the Har Bais itself, the main structure we're going to talk about is the Azara. You'll see when the Mishnah says how much space there was around the Azara, it says the most space was down here to the south. The second most was here to the east. The third most was up here. We'll get to the measurements in a moment by the north. And the least was over here. If you add the Ezra Snushim, it's actually the least over here. We'll see we're going to add the Ezra Snushim in a moment. Let's go there and come back again. The reason why we don't look at the Ezra Snushim is that Ezra Snushim is not integral to being the Bais Hamikdash. Bais Hamikdash means, we mentioned it before, there is an outer courtyard with a Mizbeach HaChitzin, and in there there's a structure that's covered with a roof. Within it there are two sections, a Kodesh and Kodesh Kadashim. Other things that were added are not necessary for it to be a Bais Hamikdash. So the Ezra Snushim is an added structure. If it's missing, the Bais Hamikdash is still fully a Bais Hamikdash. So let's sorry. The Heichel, we'll see later. There was a building, a tremendously tall building, 100 and sorry. It was also pretty well. The front of it was, according to some opinions, it was 100. We'll see, 100 amos high, 100 amos wide, and 100 amos deep, which is about 100. Like we said before, it's sorry. I don't know. They have to ask the engineers. That I don't know. Okay, so you'll tell us. It gives some specifics about what were the parts of it. We'll see. We'll get there. Hopefully. So the most space was to the down south. Now it's brought down on the Mefarshim. The reason it was like this is because in Yerushalayim, I want to do the historical part of this. This is not developed. I want to work on the historical part as well as geographical. But apparently then, and I heard it's that way today as well, the old city, and that was the whole city of Yerushalayim, is all to the south of the Har Bais. That's why they made the most space over there, because that's where people entered and congregated. And as we'll see, that's why over there were two entrances. Every side had one entrance. The south had two entrances, because that's where most of the people came from. You'll read later on they established the city over here to the west. It was the wealthy people, the elite, those who had connections with the Romans, the ones that were paying for the Kun of Dela. And you can read about that when it comes to the Romans conquering Bais Sheni, about how they went from different sections. This is, I think, the final section that they attacked was where the elite lived. So let's just move along. So when we add the Ezra Snushim, as you can see, then you have the least space is to the west. But we don't look at Ezra Snushim in terms of talking about the main structure, which is the Azara. Moving along, so let's look at the entrances. We see that there's two gates, and the Rambam says that all the gates, all the doorways had also doors. They weren't just entrances; they were actual doors. It doesn't say if it was two doors that opened or one door. Often, if that's not mentioned, it means not always, but that means it's not relevant. They can make whatever they want, whatever works for them. It's not a detail that's important in terms of having to be a specific way. There was two gates down south. They were called Shari Chulda. One of the reasons that's given is maybe because the Neviah Chulda, that's where she sat. And those doorways were used as entrances and exits. You have another one, let's go to the east, it's called Shar Shushan. It was also used as an entrance and an exit. People used it because we'll see one of them was not used. And it's called Shar Shushan because the permission to build the Bais Hamikdash was given by Kirish, who was the son of Esther. And because they did it with the permission of his kingdom of Paras, Persia, and their capital was Shushan, so he wanted them to make an image of Shushan engraved above it, and it was called Shar Shushan. We'll get to the top gate in a moment. The gate to the left is called Shar Kipainus. Saw a number of reasons, three possible reasons, I don't remember what they were, for why it has that name. It also was used as an entrance and exit. And then finally we have on top, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, I said Shar Toti, somebody told me it's a different pronunciation, I have to check in the Shnai and Kudasar. But that gate was not really used. It says that it was used one time, that it was used as if the plane was tummy. We'll maybe get to that later. They were in the Bais Hamikdash. There's a structure over here that we'll learn about by the Azara. If the kohen was tummy, he would go down a winding staircase. There was a mikvah. He would tovel. Then he'd come back up and stay with everybody else. I guess maybe not in order that it shouldn't be obvious that he was tummy, which could be maybe because of embarrassment. And then when the day began and people started moving around, he would walk out and leave the Har Bais through the Shar Todi. Shar Todi was also physically different than the other Sharim. The other Sharim are like a regular gate. It's two things on the side and a top. Shar Todi was like a tent. And some people say it was a 10th meaning from top to bottom, from when it started at the floor all the way up. Others say it was a regular doorway up to the top, and then on top, instead of being straight or maybe round, it was like an upside down V. So that's for the doorways to the Har Bais. I don't have over here it mentions because the south side of the Har Bais, what we said already, had the largest open space, and that's what they did in concrete there for the two entrances on that side. And that itself is because the city where people lived was down south. This is another interesting thing. I don't know if we want to get too distracted with it, but the Shar Shushan, right? You have a wall. You have a tall wall around the Har Bais. By Shar Shushan, above the wall, they didn't make it go much higher. So you have a 20 amas door. They didn't put on top of it a lot of stones. Why not? Because over here you had the Har Mishkan, and the Kohen who was doing the Paraduma would have to go over there and look into the doorway of the. You would have to look into the door of the Ulam, which is in the Heichel over here. Now, when you come into the Har Bais, you see it's flat. Let's say, when you want to go into the Ezra's Nashim, you have to go up 12 steps that are 6 amas. So just now you went up 6 amas. Then when you want to go into the Azara, you have to go up 15 steps, 7.5 amas. So 6 and 7.5 is 13.5. Then there's another 3 steps to the Duchen, there's another 2.5 amas. So already up to 16. And then if you have the 12 steps to the Heichel, you have another 6 amas. So we just added 22 amas in the height. That means if a person's standing over here, they can't look through the door and see the entrance to the Ulam because it's 22 amas high. They're going to see the steps. So they have to look into the Ulam from above the doorway. So in order to accomplish that, they couldn't have the bricks or the stones above the doorway going too high, because then it would obstruct the view. So the wall on top of it was not so elevated. It was a little low. And then finally, one more thing is that there was a Bezdin over here. It's brought down in the Rambam, I think it's the last Sefer, Hilchos Sanhedrin. I think the process was that if they went to a local Bezdin, and for whatever reason, the Bezdin either couldn't figure out the halacha, or one of the parties has more of a right than the other, said, I don't want to hear the ruling of this Bezdin, I want a better Bezdin. So they would go from there to the Bezdin that was in the entrance of the Har Bais. I don't know if it was inside or outside. It just says it was at the entrance of the Har Bais. I haven't seen much on it. And if they weren't satisfied with that, or if the Bezdin wasn't able to, let's use an example, if the Bezdin wasn't able to determine the halacha, they go to the next level. So the starting off is 23 people in a Bezdin. If it's matters, let's say, of life and death, or other things they need 23 people for, they would start in the local Bezdin in their community, in their city. If they couldn't figure out the halacha, they would go to this Bezdin that was an entrance to the Har Bais. If they didn't know the halacha, they go to the next Bezdin, which was at the entrance of the Azara. We'll get to that later. And if they couldn't figure it out, they go to the final place. There's no such thing as them not being able to figure it out. If they can't figure it out, they have to make a final decision, which would be to, whatever criteria there are, to be Mekel, to be Machmer, which is the Sanhedrin, the Bezdin Agadol of 71, which is we'll see later where that was. So let's move along now. So here you have a visual representation. We're talking about 500 amas by 500 amas. What is that? So if you look at it, putting it in Crown Heights, it's around from Kingston to Brooklyn. It's about 780 feet, each one of these blocks. And it's a square, so over here the blocks are shorter. You have till Union, till President. You don't get all the way to Carroll. You get past the alleyway over here, next to the Tzivus Hashem's place over here. It's a little past the alleyway. It's like halfway between the alley and Carroll. That's 500 amas by 500 amas. That was the size of the Har Bais. I think a lot of times, and this is mentioned, people point out that they thought it was bigger. So maybe one of the things I was pointing out is that sometimes when we look at it this way, we don't appreciate the size. Looking at it, I'm not going to say that it's a huge space, but 770 is right here. We're talking about something which is many, many times that area. Sometimes I gave a share the other night and somebody said it. I thought it was bigger. I said, it could be Taka doesn't measure up to what you think. But at the same time, I think maybe we're not appreciating the size. I was telling you have a house, it's 20 by 60. It's surprising what you can fit into a house, 20 by 60. It's a lot more than you think. So sometimes we don't necessarily appreciate the size of things, especially today we have Google Earth. You can see the whole world. You zoom in, you zoom out, and everything's like nothing. We talk about millions and billions, and things lose their size and proportion, and how big they really are. Here's another perspective of the same exact thing. Again, you see it's from Kingston to Brooklyn, and from Eastern Parkway all the way up till it doesn't hit Carroll, almost past the alleyway. So that's all for the Har Bais. Let's move along now and go into the Ezra's Nashim. So really the first thing should come up here, I change it around, is that there was 12 steps. I did change it. In front of the entrance into this today, I was thinking the order should be changed. I had something else beforehand. There was 12 steps. Each step was a half a amma by a half a amma. So the total basically is now you went up 6 ammas, which is about 10 feet of stairs, 9 feet, 9.5 feet of stairs. Now the reason it was called the Ezra's Nashim, I'm not sure. I heard somewhere, but I couldn't find the source afterwards. Is because they made a special area for women. The whole area became called Ezra's Nashim. It wasn't a place just for women. The woman had an area up here. It was an upper level porch, which was made for the woman. So this is really, everything over here is 2D, but this is elevated. It's not clear. I couldn't find anywhere. Did it also extend to this side? Did it extend all the way? Did it extend partially? Because the doorways here. That's what's seen to come in here. Already saw the stairs came in through here. This door would take you into the Zara. But it certainly was on these sides over here. And we also have a general idea of their proportion because you had these rooms, as we'll talk about in a moment, these lashachis that were exactly 40 amas by 40 amas. So we do have the sense of like that it didn't go all the way up to here, and it didn't stop over here, but it went all the way to here to the wall. So right away, what comes out over here is you see those different chambers. Well, first let's talk about the size. It's 135 amas by 135 amas. It's also a perfect square. It's about 212 feet by 212 feet. We'll show later on what that would look like in heights. We'll get another map of that, visual of that. Then you have these chambers over here. They're called l'shachis. Each one was 40 amas by 40 amas, which is around 63 feet by 63 feet. Again, we'll see later what that looks like. We'll see it in the map, size. So what they served were, there was 4 of them. This one over here is called the Lishkas HaNazirim. So the Nazir would bring 3 karbanis when he completed his Nazirus. One of the karbanis is a shlomim. Very often with the name of the carbon, you can know a lot about it. An oilah gets supposed completely up, it's burnt entirely. A shlomim, everybody gets a portion of it, the kohen, the mizbeach, and the owners. So the Nazir would get a part of the shlomim. He would actually cook it over here in a pot, and then the hair that he would cut off, he would burn it on that fire. I'm not sure exactly why they gave this place for him. Why couldn't he did it somewhere else? Because he did the whole Yerushalayim. But that was a lishka for the Nazirim. Then when you go up here, you have lishkas dira eitzim. So if a kohen, by the way, if anybody has any questions, you can throw them ask. You can answer. You have a lishkas dira eitzim. So if a kohen was a baal mum, he had some sort of blemish, and he's not allowed to do the avodah in the mikdash. So I don't know if it's some way of appeasing them or of including them. They would basically work over here. It wasn't considered a regular avodah like shtita or kabbalah or srika, which only a kohen that wasn't a baal mum could do. So they would work over here in the lishkas dira eitzim. They would basically make sure that the wood didn't have any worms. Sorry? Yes, this is I mentioned at the beginning. Pretty much all of this, I would say 98% is based on Hilchos based here in the Rambam. I'm talking specifically about Bais Sheni. I'm on no, pretty much just the Rambam. And the Rambam is, I didn't mention at the beginning, but Yecheskel had a nevuah of 14 years into the Galus. So the Yidden still have another 56 years. 56 years is a whole, depends. When you look back, you're like, oh, it's just 56 years. But the person's like, 56 years is a long time. He had a nevuah about the Bais Hamikdash, and either it was told him clearly in the nevuah, or he knew intuitively, I wasn't clear about that it was talking about Bais Shlishi, it was not Bais Sheni. And he was told to tell the Yidden about it. He told Hashem, like, what am I going to tell them? They're full of pain. I'm going to start telling them about Bais Hamikdash in the future. And Hashem said that's where you have the thing, that whoever learns about the Bais is as if they're building it. If you learn about the Bais Hamikdash, it's like you're building the Bais Hamikdash. And when they built the Bais Sheni, they basically built it based on Bais Rishon, but they incorporated whatever was clear from the Nevuah of Yecheskel, they incorporated into it. So that's the Bais Sheni that we had. So Lishkas dira eitzim, like we said, is where the Kahanim that were buying one check the wood for worms. Then on the top left we have the Lishkas HaMetzorayim. So over here there was actually a mikvah. The Metzora would immerse himself in the table over here. And then the part of the tire of the Metzora is they had to get the blood and the oil sprinkled on their thumbs and their big toes. But they couldn't go into the next area where all this was happening because they still weren't fully pure. So they would stick their thumbs through the door and their feet. I guess one at a time, and have it sprinkled for their tire. So this was a chamber that was used for that. And everything over here didn't have a roof. And then finally we have Lishkas Beis Shmani. Somebody asked, how did they get roof? Like over here we have the wine and oil. So it could be inside they had, you know, if you have people have in the backyards, waterproof shed or whatever it is, a garage, whatever type of structure where they kept it protected. But the thing itself, there's no roofs over here in any of the sections. Let's move along a little bit. We have over here, everything over here, by the way, is scaled. I think even, I don't remember this, I think somebody pointed out to me when they made it to the stairs originally, they were more, I wanted to make them more round, but it ended up extending very far, which is not proportional. But I'm not sure what this is. This is a total, there's 15 steps over here. It says it corresponded to the 15 shiramalis. Each step was a half amma by half amma, just like the steps entering the Zara. And the Levim would play music over here. Now there's a discussion about that because you know that the Levim played music on what's called a duchen, which was next to the Mizbeach. They played the music in Karbanis report. What is this referring to over here? So I think there's various answers. Rashi says that it's referring to Simchas Beis HaSheva. In Simchas Beis HaSheva, the people that were dancing in the Snushin, and the Levim would play their instruments on these steps. Now, if you look at it, if there are 15 steps going up to the next section, so imagine you're standing here, that means the next section is all the way up there. So that means when you're coming up to the wall over here, this above here is the next screw. So over here, they basically had doors that went underneath the Azara, and they had a chamber, I don't know the size, where they stored their instruments. So you see that over here, there's two doorways, and that's where the Levim would store their instruments. So it's underneath the Azara, which is the next section. This is the Ezra Slushing. That's pretty much it for the Ezra Slushing. Any questions again? Yes. Okay, this is what I mentioned before. That also here there was a best of 23 people. It says it's at the entrance of the Azara. Everywhere that I saw, people write that it was the Ezra Slushing. Where it was, it's not written. But I haven't seen a source that says it was the Ezra Slushing. The Azara had 7 entrances or 13 entrances. Maybe it says the entrance, the main entrance of Sha'ar, I don't know. But it just says it's at the entrance of the Azara. It doesn't mention, I don't think, I didn't see at least, that it was an Ezra Slushing specifically. I know Lefnuni, when he made his model, he put it in the Ezra Slushing. I used to have a little structure over here. So somebody asked me, where'd you get it from? I said, if I put it there, I just saw it somewhere, I don't know where. And then I remember I saw it in the model that Lefnuni, he brought it to the Rebbe. He put it over there. But then I realized he just put it somewhere. There's no way. I didn't see anywhere that it was written that it was there, so I removed it. I just put a scroll that has the information. So that's pretty much it for the Ezra Slushim. So we'll move along now to the. Okay, we'll see the size. So in terms of the size, if you remember, this is the first time. 135 amos, we said it's around 212 feet. That's the width of the Ezra Slushim, and as we'll see later, we're going to see it really beforehand. If you remember, we saw that the Azara and the Ezra Slushim, they were the same width. So this width of 212 is not just for that as a Slushim, it's also the width of the Azara that we'll see later. So it's from Eastern Parkway to Union, and it's square. The equivalent of that is that you go the whole 770. You go this part of it, then there's the steps that go to 770 here. You go past the courtyard, and it's about halfway through the library. That would be square of the Azara. Here's it from another view. Again, it's from Eastern Parkway. This goes to Union. And then it goes over through the library. And then for the Lashachas, we said there's 63 feet around, 40 amas by 40 amas. So that's this area over here in front of 770 is around 63 feet. Some of these areas not over here later. I actually went with the measuring tape and measured. I went at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it didn't look so strange. I'm doing this up at 1 o'clock. Fits into that. But this 63 feet by 63 feet. And you see it goes from 770 almost the whole street pretty much. And from here, one side of 770, so partially into the corner. Here's another view. That's the size of each lishkor. Lishkor and the shachar. So the shachar is singular, lishkor, shachar. Okay, so that's pretty much it for that discussion. Now we move to the Azara. The Azara is a lot more elaborate. It probably takes, I don't know, 5 times as long to go through it or more. If we went through everything, it would be even more than that. So let's go to the Azara. So right away you can see when we look over here, it's the same. Let's go back for a moment. You can see it's the same exact size in this direction as the Ezra Slushim. So that means it's 135 amas, but you can see it's longer. It's not a perfect square. So it's 100. Okay, here's a general overview. We have this big building called the Heichel. We'll get later into the measurements. It goes 100 amas by 100 amas by 100 amas. There are different opinions. Some opinions say that it went in. You see a lot of pictures in the back. But we're going to go with the opinion that says that it very, very slightly went in. It wasn't even very noticeable. It very slightly went in, but it was pretty much 100 amas in every direction, which is about close to 200 feet. We'll see later, also get a sense of how large it is. So over here at the beginning, you had Ezra's Yisrael, then you had Ezra's Kainim, and then you had the Mizbech. Those are the main parts. So we see there's a lot more. There were many doorways, there were Lashachas, there were other things as well. But this is the primary elements that the Azara consists of. There's a Heichel, there's an Ezra's Yisrael, Ezra's Kainim, and a Mizbech. Now the size was 135 amos by 187. So 135, we said already, is around 212 feet, and 187 is 295 feet, around 295 feet. So 212 by 295 feet. Looking at the breaking it down further, so the Ezra's Yisrael was 11 feet. We'll see later on. It's not very big. It's like 18 inches. What? 18 feet. 11 amos. It's about the sidewalk of Kingston Avenue. And if you remember, we said that 212 feet is from Eastern Parkway to Union. So that means the Ezra's Yisrael was like the sidewalk from Eastern Parkway to Union. That was the entirety of the Ezra's Yisrael, as well as the Ezra's Kainim, which is also 11 amos wide. We'll see later. We'll see a visual of it. Then the next section is where the Mizbeach was. It's 32 amos. This area between the Mizbeach and the Heichel is 22 amos. It's specifically being broken up this way because we're going to see later that this whole area right here, this square, is called Tzafin. When you say Shchitasim Bat Tzafin, Kachay Kadashim is Shchitasim Bat Tzafin. Kachim Kalim is Shchitasim B'chol Mokim Ba'azar. We'll see. So this whole area is called Tzafin. So that's why each one is given a separate thing. Then over here we have the Heichel, which we already mentioned is 100 amos. And then finally at the back we had again an area of 11 amos. And then in terms of the width, so we have one section over here, which is the Tzafin part, 16.5 amos. Then you have the Mizbeach, which took up 62 amos. And if you picture in 770, if we get to it later, you'll see it's pretty much from the front of 770, all the way from the Aron Kodesh, up to the staircase on the right of the Farbringen area. Remember, Farbringen, it's almost the whole 770. That's the length of the Mizbeach with the ramp. And then you have a small little area of 12.5 amos. So that's the division of the different measurements over here. So you can see over here, it's the same. We're talking about the Azara. It's from Eastern Parkway to Union, just like we said with the Ezra's Nashim, but it's smaller. It doesn't stop by the library. It goes a little further. Another the library and another 2 houses. This is around the size of the Azara, and here you see from another view that was the Azara. I think. Okay, now in terms of the entrances, there's a mission. I think that there's an argument about how many entrances there were. There's a sikh from the Rebbe about it that's saying that it's not a machlekes b'metzias. They're not arguing how many entrances there were. Everybody agrees to the actual number of entrances. The argument is which one has the gather of an entrance, and there could be various nafkaminas. In other words, there was an opening. The question is it considered an entrance? So you can have, a way to get into somebody has in the basement these trapdoors, but you won't necessarily call it an entrance. Everybody agrees that it's there. It didn't have the gather of an entrance, and I think the Rebbe brings a possible nafkamina or an actual nafkamina, whether it has the gather, the definition of an entrance, or it's just an opening. So the Rambam only talks about 7 entrances. So you have one entrance over here, and then on each side you had 3 entrances, to the north and to the south. So let's go through the entrances. The entrance to the east is called Sha'ar Nikanor. Then we had the Bais Hamikdash, and we'll see later all these things, we'll get into them. Then you had the Sha'ar HaKarbonis and the Sha'ar HaNitzitz. I think it's the only one that they don't really give an explanation for the name. The other ones all have an explanation why it was given that, and the Bais Hamikdash. The other ones all have an explanation for the name. Then you have the Sha'ar Mayim. He gives 2 possible reasons for that, either because that's where they would bring the tzloiches, this little thing of water for Nisach HaMayim on Sukkot, or because it says when Mashiach comes, water is going to come out of the Azar, and it says it's going to come through that doorway. The Karbonis is called the Sha'ar Karbonis because the Karbonis, the Kachim, have to be shechted here. So they would bring them in through the Tamid Shel Shachar was brought in through here, through the Sha'ar Karbonis. Then you have the Sha'ar HaBcheris. The Bechor, if we say every day before by davening Abchor Meiser, it's Kachim Kalim. So the carbon could be brought anywhere in the Azara. So they didn't have to specifically bring it here, so they had a separate entrance. And then finally you have the Sha'ar HaDelik, which is the fuel, which refers to the wood that we learned about before. So apparently the Kahanim would check the wood. Imagine it's probably over here now, right? You have over here the Ezra's Nashim. There was this little area over here, the Lishkas Dir Eitzim. They would check the wood, and then they would take it out from the front door, bring it around the side, and bring it in through here. So for the wood for the Mizbeach. So that's the final entrance. Let's go through some details. Sha'ar Nikanor is, we know there's a famous story with Nikanor, is the only we mentioned before that all the doorways had doors except for the entrance. We'll see later to the ulam. So all the doors ideally were made out of gold. The only exception was the Shar Nicanor was made out of bronze because of the special miracle that happened, that he went to get these doors from Egypt, from Alexandria, and the ship that he brought it on was having trouble on the waters, and they had to lighten the load. I don't know if they only threw the door off because it was very heavy or other things, but the problems continued, and they decided to throw out the second one. He said, if you throw it off, I'm going with it. And so they left it, and the storm quieted. When he came to Eretz Yisrael, they saw that the door came along. So because of that miracle, I guess it was a sign to use it. So they used those doors, and it says that they shone like gold. So even though they're made out of bronze, they shone like gold like the other doors. Let's move along. So the Bais Hamikdash is really the main one that we're going to focus on because it's an elaborate structure. The Bais Hamikdash was, it doesn't speak about the size. So oftentimes, and it doesn't speak about the size or other such details, there's two ways of looking at it. One is we don't know, but it was a specific size. Another way is it's not relevant. It wasn't important. They could make it whatever size they decided, based on the needs that were there. So the Bais Hamikdash was an entire structure. So it's similar. It looks a little bit like the Ezra Snushi, because it has this inner area, and then there's these 4 chambers at each of the corners. So over here you had the Lishkas Atlayim. I don't remember the amount. They had to have a minimum, maybe I had it written, of amount of sheep that were always there in case there was a problem with some of them. They had to have every single day the carbon tumid in the morning and the afternoon. So that's where they would put here you have it. Okay, where there were ready sheep for karbanis, specifically the carbon tumid, and there were never less than 6 sheep. And then over here you had lishkas lechem apanim, but they made the lechem apanim. Now I have to point out. Let's go back a moment. That the Bais Hamikdash, everybody agrees that the upper part, we're talking about up north, was considered chayil, and the inner part was kaidish. So you see where the karbanis were kept was kaidish, where the lechem apanim was made is kaidish. There's a discussion where the physical structure was. Was it actually like in the middle? So when it was part of it was actually in the Har Bayis, and part of it was in the Azara, or was the whole thing in? I don't even remember if it was. Maybe it was the whole thing is outside. I don't even recall now, or inside, but still half was kaidish and half was chayil. So let's go back to that. So we have the Floyim, then you have the lechem apanim. Then over there you have the gniza, where they put the stones that by the Greeks they defiled from the mizbeach. They put them in the gniza. That was over there. And then the other corner was basically there was a mikveh there, and there was also a winding staircase that led to, I think maybe the mikveh was in the winding staircase. If a kohen was tamei, they would go down. They would table, like I mentioned before. Then they would come up and just sit with everyone else. And then when the day started and they would open the doors, they would leave the Har Bayis and go through whatever purification they needed for every table. I think it says there was also a bathroom there. I think it says it's a Beis HaKisei Shel Kavod, because if the door was closed, be a door sheyesh ish, that somebody is there. So we have here where the stones in this back that were defined, where there was this winding staircase into a mikvah, and he kind of became tummy with the center table there. There's also here, it has it there. Now over here on the side, it sounds like it was sort of bleachers. You had Kohanim would sleep here. The Kohanim would sleep over here at night, and there were bleachers. It says the older Kohanim slept on the bleachers, and the younger Kohanim, whenever they made themselves comfortable, somewhere in this room over here. And in the room, there was, we'll get to that in a minute. Somewhere on the floor over here, there was one of the tiles had a ring in it. And you pick up the ring, and the key to open up the doors was there. That's where they kept it. And the kohen in charge, he would put his clothing underneath his head. He would sleep on it on top of that tile. When they opened up, okay, we'll mention it just briefly now. There was doorways that led into the Har Bayis and into the Azara. The door that led into the Azara over here, it was a big door, like all other doors, 20 amas, 3 stories high by 10 amas. It was a huge door, and in that door there was a smaller door. So in the mornings when they would start the Avodah, they would open the smaller door. 2 Kohanim would go in. We'll see a little later. They would go around the entire Azara to inspect it. They would meet up at a certain point. They'd have a certain thing that they would say, is everything okay? Yes, everything's okay. Yes, everything's okay. Then they would together go back to the room, tell everybody everything's fine. They'd close the small door, open the big door, and all the Kohanim would pour into the Azara to start the Avodah of the day, beginning with the carbon tumid. Okay, moving along, we have over here the Shar HaKabanas. So already mentioned, there was the Shar, that was the gate that was used to through which Kachei Kachim were brought, because we said the Kachei Kachim is Shtasim Batzafin. This is the Safin, it's the northern part of the Azara. Moving along, you have the Shara Nitzitz. I think I mentioned that I didn't see a reason brought for it. Meaning in the Sparm that give reasons for the names, they just don't say anything. They don't say there's no they didn't see a reason. They'll just say has this name because of this. The Shara Nitzitz was a structure. It wasn't just a door. That's what they'll say, but they won't mention anything. I didn't see anything mentioned about the name. So the Shara Nitzitz was actually a structure. It wasn't just a doorway. And we're not going to learn now about the Shmira, but Kehanim and Leviim guarded the Bais Hamikdash. Out of honor to the Bais Hamikdash, out of covet, it says you can't compare a palace that has guards to one that doesn't have guards. They had different places they would guard in the Bais Hamikdash. And in the Shara Nitzitz, I don't remember which one it was. The Kohen was on top of the roof, and the Levi on the bottom were the reverse. Here it says the Kohanim were on top of it, so I guess the Levi lower part. Then you have the Shara Mayim. So already mentioned, that's where they brought the water in for the Nisach HaMayim. Or another explanation that's given is because it says when Mashiach comes, there'll be a river, or Mayim Chaim will come out. And they say the Kabbalah was that it will come out through that doorway. Then we move along, we have the Shara Cheres. I'm guessing there's other Kachli Kalim. Cheres are not the only ones, but maybe it's the most common one. Every person that has animals is going to have, you don't always have the Becher because there's a lot of exceptions, but maybe it was common ones. So they specifically call the Shara Cheres. It's for the Karbanis that are Kachli Kalim. They don't have to come from the Tzafin, Shkutasim, B'chomak, and Bazara. They bring them through that doorway, and then finally, like we mentioned, they have the Shara Delik for the fuel. That's where they brought the wood in for the Mizbeach. Okay, let's move along. Okay, so we'll start with the Ezra's scroll here. The Ezra's scroll, like we said, is 11 amas by 135 amas. In the Ezra's scroll, you had a number of things. You had 8 lashachas. I don't know how it fits, exactly how it fit into this area. It's a relatively small area. Exact locations, I don't know, but we'll just go through them generally. So in terms of the size, that we said, the 135 amas is around 212 feet. It's like from Eastern Parkway to Union. And the 11 amas is around 17, 18 feet, which is pretty much the sidewalk over here. So this is the size of the Ezra's Yisrael and the Ezra's Kohanim. It's about the sidewalk of Kingston. So I'm guessing when it says Eimdin Tzfufim, it makes a lot of sense if they were all in such a small area. Over here you see it from a different view. That's pretty much the entirety of the Ezra's Yisrael. There were 3 lashachas to the north of it, and then there was 3 lashachas to the south, and then there was a lishkas Pinchas HaMalbish where they kept the big kohuna. That was so if you're facing east, you're looking at the Shar Nikanor, which goes into the Ezra's Nashim. On the left of it, there was a certain structure where they kept the clothing of the Kehanim, and on the right they had the lishkas Eisech Havitin. The Kohen Gadol would bring half of it in the morning, half in the afternoon. That was prepared. The Minchas Chavitin was a mincha, was prepared in that lishka to the right of the door, which is the southern part. Let's just go through what those lishachas are. So in the north you had the lishkas Adazis. We mentioned it before. That was the Sanhedrin Dirtl 71. We brought it up before when we spoke about the other body didn't. Then you had the lishkas Abela. There was a pit over there. It says the water from there, and then lishkas Eight. That was a place for the Kohen Gadol. That was he had a place to be, a little room, bed. He was able to stay, and then down south we had another 3 lishachas. So you had the lishkas Hamelach. That's every sort of Tol Korban Hakik Melach. They not cook Melach. Leisas and any carbon. Then you have lishkas Harva. They salted the skins, and this is a second mikvah. We mentioned the mikvah lishkas Mitzrayim. Here's another mikvah. And then the lishkas Eshkos, where they would mix the meat. Okay, let's move along to the Ezra's. Okay, we already did this. Lishkas we did, and the lishkas Avitim we did that as well. Okay, so this is what we mentioned already before. It says this is not proportional because it doesn't say a size. I've just made it from some size. It says that above the entire, or around the entire Azara, there was like this protrusion that came out of something. This is over the sky, sort of like a little roof, and it went around the entire Azara. And in the mornings, when they would open the small door, 2 Kohanim would come through. This, I think, is, by the way, in terms of getting proportion, this is proportional to the size of a person in the Azara. That's what it would look like. I couldn't do it in the Har Bais because we wouldn't be able to see it. It'd be too small. But in the Azara, you see how small a person would be. They would come out. They would go around the entire slide. They each go around. They would meet by the Lishkas Pinchas HaMalbish. And then whatever it was, there was a certain, apparently, There was a certain thing that would say everything's everything's fine. Then they both walk back. It doesn't say how they walk back. Yes, they walk along here, back to the door. They came in, everything's fine. They opened the main door and the Kohanim poured and started like we did today. Let's move now to the Ezra's training. This part we're going to go through more quickly. We're going to get to the staff. There's a lot to talk about, and then the Hegel. What time is it? Is there any questions in the middle? So the Ezra's training is 11 amas, the same size as the Ezra's scroll, so you have to get the same exact visual size of it. Now in the Ezra's training, there was, so from the, this is a little unclear exactly where it was located. But when you come, you have the Ezra's scroll, it's 11 amas. Beside it, you have the Ezra's training, it's 11 amas. But to get from one to the next, there was a step was an hour. All the other ones, if you remember, it's called a duchen actually. All the other ones were a half hour. So step that's an hour, and on top of that, there were 3 steps. Each one a half hour by half an hour. So now you went up 2.5 hours. So that was from the Ezra's scroll to the Ezra's training. Those 3 steps, that's the duchen. That's where they would, with the Levim, I think, play their instruments by the Korbanos. As I said, that's when the Levim would stand on the duchen and they would do shir there and play their instruments by the Korbanos. So now we'll move on to the section that we mentioned before. This whole area over here, when we say Sheikh Hassan Basafin, it's referring to this section right here. If you remember, we went through the measurements. It's 11, 22, and then 32 and 22. So it's 76 amas, and the other side is 60.5 amas. I'm not sure if I gave it a visual bit. This is the soften area. So when it says Shri doesn't not soften, it has to be in this area. Any question has to be shafted. Shri doesn't not soften in this area right here. Also, so there is, it's basically the size of the building over here, 7. You don't have the next part. This is around the size of the soften. And you see from this perspective, the whole length of the here in front, it goes up to the back of the building. Now, the way it was divided, there was a number of sections. There was, I think it's 5 sections. You had the first 8 amas that were empty. Then you had 24 amas where there were tabois. It's unclear exactly how they were organized. It says 6 rows of 4. So is it 6 rows, as in 6 rows of 4 this way, or is it this way? So basically, they have 6 rows of 4, or you have 4 rows of 6. Somebody pointed out to me a mistake. They basically used the rings. I don't know exactly how it looked, but they would tie together the hands and legs of the animal. They would put them all together on a rope and pull the rope through the ring, and that way the animal was, immobile, and they would check the animal that way. Now I made a visual over here of using the 4 rows this way of 6. Somebody pointed out afterwards, I was looking into it. It seems like there's various opinions. Somebody pointed out to me there's definitely an opinion that says that they weren't spread out throughout the stuff in here. They were specifically within these 32 amas that was there. Nothing was done outside of here. The Rambam, this person told me, and I showed him the Rambam. The Rambam says the whole suffering is used, and which refers to the whole thing. So I didn't come to an end to that, but there's different opinions. Is there any clear opinion about it? Then after that, you have another section where they would have the shulchanos. They would meet over there, and then they had a place where they had these blocks that they would hang the animal into skin it to take off the skins. That was 12 hours, 12.5 hours. And then finally, you have another 8 hours that were empty. So that's the way the soften area is divided. I think now we move on to the stairs. Okay, so let's move on to the stairs. So we'll go through the Mizbeach in different steps. So first of all, just talk about the general dimensions of the Mizbeach. So the Mizbeach, you have the Mizbeach and you have the Ren. The Mizbeach was 32 amas by 32 amas. And we'll see the Yisod we mentioned before. It's one of the explanations. There was on the Yisod, the foundation was only on 2 sides. One of the explanations is, like we said earlier, that the Bais Hamikdash was between the portion of Yehuda and Binyamin, and the portion that was in Binyamin was in the Bais Hamikdash. That's why Yosef cried on Binyamin's shoulders, because the Bais Hamikdash would be destroyed. So from the Mizbeach and inwards, including the Kodesh Kedoshim was on the side of Binyamin, and to the east of it was Yehuda. But Yehuda's went right along the Mizbeach. along where the Yesod is. So that portion didn't have a Yesod because everything had to be, the main parts from the Mizbeach and inwards had to be in Binyamin's portion. So there was no Yesod, it didn't have that foundation. So with the Yesod over here, it's 32 amas. And then the ramp is also 32 amas. 32 amas is basically around 50 feet. We'll see later on the perspective of what it is. I think I mentioned before, it's the entire thing. Can I take this off? Is it needed? I'll try to speak louder. I think I mentioned before that if you go in 770, the Mizbeach with the ramp is from the Irgun Torah all the way pretty much to the back wall of 770. It's still the stairs that the Rebbe would go up to and that was the length of the Mizbeach with the ramp. It's together 64 amas, but it only took up 62 amas on the ground because two of the amas, you have over here 32 amas and here 32, but they weren't side by side. The ramp would go above two of the amas of the Mizbeach, above the Yesod and the Seviv. You see over here, we'll get into those details. So it ended up taking up a total of 62 amas on the actual floor of the Azara. So those are the general dimensions. So you see it says the ramp went over the Yesod and the Seviv, which were each an amma wide. So you take off 2 amas. It's not 32 and 32, 64, it's minus 2 amas, 62 amas. So that's in terms of the length. Now in terms of the height, we'll see later, not all the amas were the same. It says 10 amas. 10 amas is usually 60 tvachim, because each amma is 6 tvachim. But 2 of the amas were 5 tvachim, so it's 58. We'll get into those details later. So it's 10 amas. The breakdown, okay, here it shows. I don't remember. I did this a year ago. I came to 770 at night with a measuring tape to measure, what's 50 feet. So 50 feet is from this wall over here till over here, the ladies section. That means on the bottom of the Mizbeach, that was the length. And it goes all the way to like over here. So you're picturing the Mizbeach. I think the Mizbeach is a lot bigger than people realize. The height of the Mizbeach is like 15 feet. So there's a huge thing there in the Hazara. So here, this is what you see. If you go to, here's the arrow. It goes from the wall from the Irgun Torah all the way till here. It goes from the bottom of the sphere, and it's from here to here. So it would be wider than this one comes in over here. It would be bigger. Let's go back to the Mizbeach and look at what's over here. Okay, this is with the ramp that I mentioned before. The Mizbeach with the ramp came almost to the staircase over here. Okay, let's look at the width and the length. So we said it's 32 amas over here and 32 amas in the back. There was a Yesod on both sides, so it's 32 by 32. If you move along, the Yesod was an amma wide. So now you have 32 by 32, but then it went in. We'll see later on what the total ends up being. Then it goes up 5 amas. I'm not sure it mentions that because I'm not in the height now. Then the Seviv went in another amma. Then you had, there were 5 tvachim. Let's see that now. Then you had another amma for the corners. And then you have another amma for the makim hill of the kayin. The kayin, and this is, by the way, proportional. This would be around the size of a kayin in the context of the Mizbeach. So you had an area that you can walk around the outside of the Mizbeach. You can go up and come down from that way. So you have over here, if you saw, we took off 1 amma for the side, on each side. So that's 2. Then another 2 for the Seviv. Then another 2 for the Kronis. And then another 2, from each side for the Makim Hill of the Canaan. You get down to 24 amas. But 2 of those amas were amas of 5 tvachim instead of 6. So you have to add 4 tvachim. It ends up being that the top area, the Marach, was 24 amas and 4 tvachim squared. That was the area of it. I'm not sure what the measurement that equivalent is. Let me see if I have it written here. It's around 39 feet by 39 feet. Now the ramp wasn't as wide as the Mizbeach. The ramp was half the width. The Mizbeach we said on the bottom is 32 by 32. The ramp was 16 amas. The ramps over here, by the way, on the side are not correct. And again, it's possible there was a specific way it had to be made, or it's possible you have to make 2 ramps, one to the Yesod, one to the Seviv. Figure it out. No matter how you make it, it's fine. Obviously, everything is exact. Even a leaf moves around, it's exact. But somehow, even when something seems not exact, it's exact. So I'm not sure if there was a specific way it had to be made, but there was 2 ramps. This is not the way it was. It either was a ramp coming to the Yesod and a ramp going to the Seviv. It could be they were both on one side. It could be one was on one side, one was on the other side. I didn't see anything written on it about those ramps. Now let's see the height. We already spoke about it a little bit. You have that Yesod was 1 amma high. Then you have 5 ammas that it went up straight. Then it went in, we said for the Soviv, then it went up another 3 amas, and then you have an amma of the Kronis. So if you just add all that together, you have a total of 10 amas. One on the 1, then 5 is 6, then another 3 is 9, another one for the Kronis, you have 10 amas. Now the ramp was not 10 amas, because it went up to the top of the Mizbeach, not the Kronis. Without the Kronis, it's 9 amas. So the ramp was 9 amas. Now, like I mentioned before, they weren't full amas. It was 10 amas, not 60 tefachim, it was 58. Because we said that the Yesod over here was 5 tefachim, and also I think it was the Kronis. The Kronis was 5 tefachim. So it was 58 tefachim. And like we said, the ramp was 9 amas, because it went up to the top of the Mizbeach. Right here, it's 9 amas. The Kronis added another am. Let's see, there's different parts in the Mizbeach over here. So first of all, they had a Seirig. The Seirig was basically divided the Mizbeach in half. When we say divided the Mizbeach in half, the Mizbeach is 58 tefachim. We're looking at 58 tefachim. So 29 tefachim. If you want to get 29 tefachim, what you're going to do is like this. Let's take these 5 amas here. Let's remove 1 amma. Let's look at 4 amas. 6 times 4. 6 times 4 is 24. Plus we said the Yesod was 5 tefachim. That's 29 tefachim. So it was 1 amma beneath the Soviv was the schut. And when you could see based on where the level of the carbon was how they treated the blood. So carbon chatas was a more chomer dika type of carbon, was at an elevated holiness. You have to do arba matanis. You have to actually put 4 matanis, 4. You have to put it in 4 places in the mizbeach on the corners, and it has to be in the upper half. Whereas I think it's an oila, doesn't have as much of a kedusha. You don't have to do 4. You could do shtayim shein arba on the 2 corners, and they splat it to the sides, and it can be in the lower half. And you'll see a lot of the elements connected to the sprinkler. You could even do one time. Sometimes it's just 1 sprinkling. If it's even a higher level things in Yom Kippur, you could have sprinkling even inside by the kodesh in the kodesh HaKadoshim. You can see how the level of the carbon aligns with the din with the blood, with the zrika. Now over here we said this. So here we said there was a remark that was the secret to divide the mizbeach in half. So you should know the blood that has to be in the upper half has to be above that point, and the lower half has to be beneath that point. Otherwise, at times possible carbon. Over here there were 2 holes. The way you see over here you have that corner. So they were like in a diagonal holes. And you see it says one was to the west, which means it was towards this side. Let's go back there a second. The west is this side over here, because here we have the Hevel, and the south is down here. So one was over here and one was to the south. And that's where they poured the blood, and it would go down underneath. It was an opening, it would flow into a river. Now, it could sometimes congeal. It would go down and congeal, and then it would block up, and the blood couldn't go through. So they had over here, just like we said that they had a ring in a marble thing that they could pick up inside with the kiwas. They also had one over here. They could pick it up and it opened up into that area. If the blood congealed, they could clean it out so that it should flow properly into the river that went underneath. And then over here you had an opening. I think it's called an arbuva. I'm not sure if that was if I'm pronouncing it correctly. If they had a psul chatos, they had to basically it was possible they couldn't use it, but it wasn't yet. It had to stay overnight. And I don't remember the specifics of it. If somebody remembers, they could share that it couldn't be taken out of the mizbeach until it also had a puzzle of lino, that it was overnight. So they kept it there overnight, and then after they could remove it. Or it had to be completely. I think maybe it had to be completely spoil or rot, so that they could take it out. I don't remember the details of it. Here they placed the psul chatas where that first become nicer before being removed and burnt, but I think it's brought down elsewhere that I saw that it had to get completely basically ruined, become ice food, not royal l'maychel, and then they could take it out. I think that's it for the. Okay, we mentioned the 2 small ramps already. One went to the side over here, and one went to the side. Yes. So yeah, exactly. So for the carbon chatos, yeah, that's very hard. You can't get the top of it. So yeah, they would go onto the ramp that went up to the side. I'm not sure when they went up to the side. The one that went to the side didn't go onto there. And then over there it was done with his finger. It's placed on the corners. Yeah, thank you. Here's it's really a repeat of it, but this has the other one you saw was like 3D, so you couldn't necessarily get the details as well. Not going to go through it. Let's go through it just quickly. So you see on the bottom was 32 amas. So imagine you're in the back of the mizbeach now that has the site across from it. So you're looking at it from up north or from the west. Then it went up. That width over there, that size was 5 tefachim. It wasn't 6 tefachim amma. Then this was 30 amas and 2 tefachim, right? It didn't go in a full amma. It went in 5 tefachim. If it went a full amma, what would be left? If you take 32 amas and you minus 1 on each side, you go down to 30. But it didn't minus a full amma. It minus 5 tefachim. So you have to still retain 2 tefachim. So it's 30 and 2 tefachim. Then it went over here also only 5 tefachim in. So now you have, instead of taking off a full 2 amas, it's not going to be 28 and 2 tefachim. It's 28 and 4 tefachim. Then you take off, by the way, everything over here is also scaled. It's exact scale down to size in terms of like proportional. Then over here you have an amma for the frontis, that's a regular amma, an amma for the mokim hilach payanim, and then you have left 24 ammas and 4 tefachim on the top. And these are also, this you can imagine, this is proportional. This would be the size of a person standing by the mizbeach. So it was, we saw the slides when we looked over there, we showed some assembly. And then over here it shows the same thing for the height. You have on the bottom 5 tefachim, then you have 5 ammas, full ammas, then you have 3 full ammas, and then you have another amma of 5 tefachim. And then you can see the total height is 58 tefachim. And then when we count the midway point, because we already did that before, I think it said over here there's 30 ammas, you take off 1 amma. So you have 24 ammas, 4 times 6, 6 times 4 is 24, plus 5 is 29, so that's 29 tefachim. You have exactly the midpoint right here for the chut sikra. Okay, now we come to the heichal. So in front of the heichal, there was again 12 steps. There's different opinions about these steps. It's interesting. You open up Mishnayos, it tells you one thing, and the Rambam writes that it's a totally different size of the steps. The Mishnayos, I think it says there's 2 steps, then a longer step. The way it's written in Mishnayos, the steps basically took up the whole space till the Mizbeach. But the Rambam writes that there was 12 steps, just like before the Azara. Each one was a half a amma, So it was a total of 6 ammas that took up over here, and then 6 ammas that the heichal went up. Now it was 100 ammas by 100 ammas by 100 ammas. Again, like I mentioned before, you'll see also a lot of pictures. Sometimes they say it's like an avi, meaning that it was wide in the front and it went in. Some opinions say that it was almost a perfect square. It went in a way that it was barely noticeable, extremely slight indent. That's the way that I went with over here. But there are different opinions about it. And looking at, imagine the heichal, I don't think I did the height, but the height is like an 18-story building. And keep in mind, there was an actual 2-story building. That means you walked into there, when you walked in, you looked at the roof, at the ceiling. The ceiling is like a 6-story building high. So like I mentioned, you see more the imposing part of the Bais Hamikdash. The Gashmi is physically mostly with the height of things. So it was like an 18-story building, and each floor was, we'll see why it was not 9 and 9. We're going to get to the division. And it's the size, you see, it's from, okay, let's see the other perspectives. So easier. That's about the width of the heichal, and also the way it went back. Let's go back to the previous one to see better. I think over there. It went all the way to the end of the building. I think there's other images so you can see better this side. There were 2 floors, and each one was 40 ammas. So the whole thing was 100 ammas, but you had to have space. There was an engineer here before. There was space for the roof. There was a space for the kalei ariv. There was a space between the 2 floors. There was also space in the bottom. We'll get to that a little later. This we already mentioned that the doorway to the, so the, I should mention it sooner, but the heichal had 3 parts. When you walked in, the first area was called the ulam, and then afterwards you went to the kodesh and kodesh HaKadoshim. So that first entrance was the only entrance to the Bais Hamikdash that didn't have any doors. That's one difference. And the other difference is that it was twice the size of all the other doors. I think you actually have a representation of it. So this is scaled down to size. If you remember before, I think the person was about that high, but if you can look at it in terms of the ulam, they could fit about 18 people, and that's how small they were in terms of the size of this door that went into the first door of the heichal, which went into the area called the ulam. So the whole building basically is called the heichal, and in it there was areas. The first area was the ulam, then the kodesh, and then the kodesh HaKadosh. Here it just says, okay, here you see. This again, it's scaled down to size. So this would be the size of a person walking through that doorway. If you scale it down, let's go through. I think it gives the measurements. You see? I was talking to actually another engineer trying to figure out, because I always said 30 feet is 3 stories. He's telling me most buildings today are actually 11 to 12 feet per story. Although he said some buildings, you'll find them like in the city, are 10 stories each. 10 feet for each story. So if you're looking at the doorway over here, it's the whole building, is it's around 160 feet. It's like a 16-story building. But a building where each story is 10 feet as opposed to 11, 12. So here you have the different measurements, 40 by 20. I don't know, are you able to see this over here? Are you able to see him in the back, this little person here? That's the size of a person. I'm realizing closer. That's the size of a person in the ulam, in the side by the hip. Now the breakdown of the 100 amas. So you have 6 amas already set. To get in, you have to go up 6 amas. That means sort of the foundation that's above ground is 6 amas. That was the 12 stairs. Then you have the first floor is 40 amas. Then between the 2 floors, there was an area of 5 amas, and the Rambam breaks it down. It says there was 1 amma of the ceiling. It had a design on it. It was, I guess, facing inside. Then there was 2 amas that was an opening. It's called the base dilfa for the water to go through if it rains. Then you have another amma of the ceiling, and then you have another amma that was for the floor above it, made of lime and stone. So you basically have an amma, 2 ammas opening, another amma, and then an additional amma for the above floor. Then you have another 40 ammas. Then again, you have the same. I think again you have the same. You have 4 ammas I think over here. It's 5 ammas. I guess the same breakdown. The amma for the ceiling with the design, the 2 ammas the base built on amma for the ceiling, and again an amma of lime and stone. And then on top, so if you do the math, you do the numbers over here, you have 40 and 40 is 85 and 5 is 10, so you have 90 and 6. There's an additional 4 ammas. So the 4 ammas, there was a mica that was 3 ammas high, and above that there was something over there so the birds shouldn't. They're going to stand on the edge of that's what birds do, right? They stand on the top of the building, and then they dirty the whole front of the face of the building. So they had on top of that a color is that the birds shouldn't stand over there and dirty the walls. Wow. Sorry? It doesn't seem like it was. Well, we'll see how it works with the time. There's all these. We're not going to get. I don't think we're going to get there, which is a good thing. We're still working on it. There's all these compartments there, but the second floor it seems was only used. There were openings in between the 2 floors, and they would lower people inside to clean the walls. It doesn't seem like there was any type of regular use over there. Okay, we're 5 minutes. Let's look now at the Heichel itself. Now we mentioned the Heichel is 100 amas by 100 amas by 100 amas. But the Kodesh and Kodashim, the whole width was just 20 amas. So when you walked in, the Ulam, so you walked into this imposing door. After you walk in, there was an area of, I think it's 11 amas. So again, it's about 18 feet. And it extended a whole 160 feet to both sides. But at the end of those 18 feet, there was a wall. And then there was another opening, 20 feet, 20 amas, which led into the Kodesh and Kodashim. So you see, it's nestled within this whole building, directly opposite the door, Kodesh and Kodashim. So it's made a mistake. It's not 11 amas. Sorry, it's 22 amas. Then you have 40 amas. Let's say I have the 100. You have 22. You have 40. You have another 20 for the Kodesh and Kodashim. So the Kodesh was 40. Kodesh and Kodashim was 20. In between, you had an amma, at least in Bais Hamikdash, and then it was 2 curtains basically. Yeah, the Rambam talks about it. Also, there was 2 curtains that divided the Kodesh and Kodashim, and they were amma apart. I think there's actually a whole discussion whether the curtains were part of that amma, were they outside of the amma. Most things are going to be discussions on it. Just went with this, sort of simple approach, not getting into those details. And then in the back you have 17 ammas. So the total, let's just do that again. The math, so you see it's up. So you have, let's see, the 40 and the 20 is 60. And then you have 1 and 17 is 18. So you have over there 16, 18 is 78. Then another 2 from the 22 is 80, plus the 20, you have 100. So you have 100 ammas. You can see in terms of the depth. Now from this side, you have 40 ammas. You're not going to talk about that right now. You have 20 ammas of the width over here, and another 40 ammas. Again, you have 40 and 40 and 20 ammas, again 100 ammas. If you're looking at the Kodesh and Kodashim, I think it's both. I don't remember what I did over here. I think this is the size of just the Kodesh, not the Kodesh and Kodashim. The size of the Kodesh would be this area over here. Okay, so what was around there? So like I mentioned before, this area was fully open. The person walked in here, 22 amas, and the whole, it's not a full 100 amas because the walls also have thickness. So let's see how. Let's end with that. The next section is going to be a little more elaborate. I don't think we're going to fit it in over here. 2 minutes left. So let's end over here. Sorry. Oh, by the way, all of this content, if anybody's interested, there are I'm putting out videos every day. They're between 2 and 5 minutes, and it's going to cover all of this, including beyond this. I'm also going to hopefully create a few more videos on the historical context, and I'm going to have to look a little bit into the geography, the way it is currently, so people can see where the old city was that we mentioned earlier, that it's to the south, that's where the 2 entrances, to add a little more context, both historically and geographically, maybe. But all of this content, including what I didn't get to yet, there are videos that are going to be put out over the next 2 weeks. I have 2 weeks to take. It's about 2 weeks of videos. Each one's again 3 to 5 minutes, and after that, there'll be another week of videos that I'm hoping to put together on the geography or the history.